What's up? Welcome to Wine School. I'm Mike. With me as always, Eric. Today we got Daniel and Leslie with us. We're going to talk a little bit about old world wines. Today's Wine School is brought to you by Physiostik, the coolest new fitness device out there. Check it out, goldenspiralwellness.com. All right, so today we're drinking a 2009 Vino Nobile di Montepulciano.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right? From Gattavecchia. So, what we want to talk about today is old world wines. And so when I first started getting into wines, I heard this old world, new world, old world, new world. People talk about that all the time. And I didn't quite get what it was. And finally I figured out, old world is Europe. For all intents and purposes. And New World is everything else. And to be honest, it kind of makes sense because they've been growing grapes in Europe, in some places, in the same vineyards for 1,000 or 2,000 years, right? They've had a lot of time to figure this out. So, like the oldest vineyards in California are like 1850, right? Mm-hmm. They're relatively new. Even South Africa, which is considered to be New World, they have vineyards that date back to the 1500s, and that's considered, very, very new compared to Europe. But there's some very, very significant differences between Old World and New World. And one of them, and the biggest one for me, was that in the US and in most places in the New World, we label wine by the grape that's in the wine. In the Old World, they label the wine by where it's made. So if you think about like Burgundy or Bordeaux, or Chianti, or Rioja. Those are all places. Those aren't grapes. And so you have to know what that grape is, or what that place is in the grapes that they grow there. And there's a ridiculous number of rules based on each individual place. So this wine that we're about to drink, this Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, have you guys ever had this before?
Never.
I have not.
Never. Sounds very interesting, right? Have you guys ever had a Chianti?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lots of times, right? So Chianti is a place, and Vino Nobile di Montepulciano is a place, and it's actually inside of Chianti.
Oh.
Inside of the Chianti region, there's a little town called Montepulciano, and they grow the exact same grape, Sangiovese, but when they grow it and they make it in that town, it's called the Vino Nobile di Montepulciano as opposed to a Chianti. So that's one of the big differences between the Old World and the New World is you have to understand this concept of labeling by place and understanding the differences from place to place. Also, the laws are ridiculously complicated and they vary from place to place. So for example, Chianti, and we know that's a region, and Montepulciano is inside of that region. We both grow Sangiovese, but for it to be called Chianti, it can actually contain up to 10% of white grapes. Montepulciano, it can also contain white grapes, but only 5%. And there's also some rules about other grapes that you can have in there as well, and those vary between regions. Also, for it to be considered a Montepulciano, it has to have a certain alcohol level. And I believe, and I may be wrong on this, it's 12% or 12.5% for Montepulciano. It's a percent lower for Chianti. So you can make an 11.5% wine in Chianti out of Sangiovese. It's Chianti. That wouldn't qualify to be a Vino Nobile. So it's very interesting. There's some other things that we also need to think about with respect to the Old World. And that is the level of quality. And for all intents and purposes, anywhere you go, there's 4 levels. And so the way to think about it is, that's my dog whining in the background. She totally wants some of this Vino Nobile di Montepulciano.
Can't blame her, right?
Right?
Right.
I mean, it's delicious Sangiovese.
Got a classy dog there.
Yeah, she knows what's up. She's down with the Old World.
She already had that. That's what she's saying.
So here's a way to think about it. Like if you made red wine in America, you could just grab a bunch of grapes from all over America, blend them together, and you could call it a red table wine. Just red table wine, and it would be fine. Now, if you got all those grapes just from California, or a certain percentage of them, you could call it a California table wine. Or if you got all of them from Napa, you could call it a Napa red wine. Or if you got it from a specific district within Napa, you could call it a Stag's Leap District wine. You follow me? There's sort of various levels of going down. And the same holds true in the Old World. There tends to be 4 levels pretty much everywhere you go. However, in each country, they use different acronyms. So in Italy, the 4 levels are, it's Vino de Tavola, I believe, is the lowest level. And that just is sort of like, it comes from Italy. The next level would be an IGT wine, and that's a Indicazione Garantia Tipica, or something like that. My Italian is
A little rusty?
a little shitty. Yeah, especially at this point of the afternoon. Then the next level would be a DOCG. I'm sorry, a DOC. And then the most specific level would be a DOCG. So you can tell this, like when you look at the bottle, you can look at this. This says Denominación de Origen Controlada y Garantida. That means it's DOCG. This is the lowest level of specificity that you can get. And you could conclude certain things about the level of quality. Just like you would conclude certain things about the level of quality if you saw a Stag's Leap District wine versus a red table wine, right? Doesn't mean that there's not really shitty Stag's Leap District wines and really awesome red table wines, but generally speaking, the more specific and the more narrow you can get the wines, the higher the level of quality, the higher the level of concentration. There's some other interesting things about this wine. So you'll see that this is a Reserva. So in some areas, Reserva means something. It has a meaning. And in other areas, it has no legal meaning, so people can slap it on, and we stupid Americans, we buy it, go, it's a Reserve. It's got to be better. But in Italy, a Reserve wine means it has 1% higher alcohol. So not only does this qualify as a Vino Nobile because it's 12.5%, but it's actually Reserve, so it's 1% higher, it's 13.5%, which means that those grapes got a little riper that year, therefore they should be a little better. So all that being said, we're about to drink this. It's a 2009. Let's get our noses in this and let's see what we get on it. You want to have any observations on this? So I'll tell you, for me, one of the things I always get on Sangiovese is like a sour cherry, like a cherry NyQuil kind of flavor.
Yeah, I smell that a little bit. Not too fruity. Not too, sweet for your tasting or looking.
Looking?
Smelling.
Smelling?
Or looking.
How's the acid on this wine? What do you guys get? We know that acid is sort of makes that sides of your tongue water. You really start to salivate.
Yeah.
It's got some acid,
I got
right?
that, yeah.
Yeah. Now, how about the
What about-
tannins? Is it drying out the sides of your cheeks?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this is perhaps more acid-driven than tannin-driven. I get a little bit of the tannins, but I
little
feel
tannins.
I feel like I get more the watery tongue than the dry cheeks. Although they tend to cancel each other out a little bit.
Also, it's a little spicy or peppery almost.
Yeah, how would you describe that? Spicy and peppery?
Yeah.
Like a black pepper, white pepper, green pepper?
Not a green.
We've talked before in wine school about oak and that sweetness, that vanilla flavor.
Right.
Did we get any of that on this? That vanilla, that toast?
I'm not getting a
I
lot of
don't
that.
think so.
No, and I don't know either. Typically what you'll find in that whole region, Chianti and Vino Nobile de Montepulciano, is they do a lot of aging in barrels, but it tends to be those older neutral barrels. So you get that little bit of oxidation, but not as much of that really deep, toasty kind of sense. This is a very classic Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, and it is different than a Chianti. The Chianti is going to be a little bit more that cherry NyQuil flavor. Well, this is a little more calm and mellow, not as quite in your face with the fruit. And it's interesting that there's that much difference when you have this area where all around it you're making Chianti, and then right in the middle there's this town that's making some wine that's slightly different. And part of that is the terroir, and part of it is also the rules about the winemaking, how many, what yields per acre you can have, and the levels of alcohol and so on and so forth. So anyway, so that's the difference between Old World and New World, and one of the things that's ridiculously hard to do is to try to really get and understand all the different areas, all the different towns, all the different zip codes, and what kind of wine is actually made there and what it's all about. So, Reserva de Gattavecchia 2009, Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. Enjoy. As always, we got 30 seconds of craziness going for you today. This one's coming at you from Scotty the Kid. Some good West Coast rap, so enjoy. Cheers.